Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Game Changers, where we talk to some of your favorite personalities in sports and fantasy sports about how they got to start and how they got to where they are now. I'm your host, Dan Harris. You can find me on Twitter at DanHarris80. I said the name of this podcast is Game Changers. I'm not sure that is quite adequate for our guest today. He didn't really change the game. He more kind of invented the game or wrote instructions or edited the instructions for the game. He's FSWA Hall of Famer, senior fantasy analyst for NFL Media, Michael Fabiano. You can find him on Twitter at Michael_Fabiano. Fabs, thanks for joining me today. How you doing?
Hey, man, it's my pleasure. How are you?
I'm doing well. Let me ask something, because you've obviously, you're one of the originals here. I'm Dan Harris 80 on Twitter because I'm, probably the millionth person named Dan Harris, but you're like one of the originals. Was there no straight up Michael Fabiano available on Twitter?
It's so funny that you asked that question because there is a Michael Fabiano on Twitter. He is an American operatic tenor, and I had him on my Sirius XM show yesterday.
Oh.
And it was a lot of fun. It was like the Twilight Zone. It's like, so Fabs, hey Fabs, it's like that Spider-Man meme where like they're pointing at each other.
Exactly, yeah.
And so, so Michael Fabiano, the operatic tenor, had Michael Fabiano on Twitter first, so I went with Michael_Fabiano. It's funny too because he said that he gets like 60% of his tweets are asking him fantasy football questions, and I says, "Well, do you ever answer?" And he's like, "We should switch our accounts one day. Like, I'll run your account, you run my account. We'll have a little bit of fun with it." Seemed like a very good guy. He's actually in Madrid right now, and he was the first American singer to do an indoor event there since the pandemic started.
So, wow. So you're like the worst Michael Fabiano. Sounds
I'm
right?
the other Michael Fabiano.
Yeah, I got
That's
it.
exactly it. We're both Italian. We're both from the Northeast. He's a Jersey guy. I'm from Connecticut. We're both big Yankees fans. It's funny, man. It was a lot of fun.
Well, I didn't realize Yankees fan. I'm a Mets fan, unfortunately. So we're in trouble.
My condolences.
I appreciate it. I'm also a Jets fan and a Knicks fan, so I'm in a lot of trouble.
One of my best friends, Jason Smith, who has his own show on Fox Sports. I worked with him at NFL Network for
How
a few
about
years.
a Fresca on Twitter?
Yes,
right?
He is the same. And I torture him constantly because his dad, who is a good friend, is a Yankees fan and a Giants fan, although I'm not a Giants fan. I'm a Cowboys fan.
Yep.
But I keep telling him, I'm like, dude, you could have had a good life as a sports fan. The Giants have won a couple Super Bowls. You could have been a Yankees fan, but you went against the grain, went against the old man. You went Jets, Mets, and now you suffer every year.
Yeah, well, for me, I was born into it. I mean, I'm from like Queens, so you can't go Yankees. You can't go Giants. You go Mets and Jets because you're close to the island. So that's where we are. Funny, by the way, that you mentioned that before we get into it. There is a lawyer who has the Twitter handle Dan Harris, and he constantly gets my stuff. What's funny is that I actually was a lawyer before I got into the fantasy business. So if anybody ever, people are looking for him and they come to me, I'm going to be able to answer their question. But I think he's getting a little annoyed, frankly, that he's constantly getting all these things. But whatever.
Well, just tell him to give you, Dan Harris.
That's right.
And then he can flip his, and then it won't be a problem.
It'll be perfect. I love the idea. All right, so we're going to get into your journey into how you actually got into the business. But before we start, I want to remind everybody that we are doing a giveaway. It's a signed Mike Evans jersey. All you need to do to be entered into the contest is leave a review for the show on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. Send a screenshot of that review to GameChangers@FantasyPros.com. If you entered our last contest, you are automatically entered for this one. But that's how you get in. If you haven't, just
I went in on that one, man.
You want in? Hey, just leave a review and say, I love the show and I love the episode.
This Fabiano's an idiot. Get him off the screen,
amazing guy. 17 stars if I could. All right, well, look, let's go back to Michael Fabiano, the kid. If I were to talk to him right now, if I met him, is he somebody who is like obsessed with sports? Does he think he's going to work in sports when he gets older or what?
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, ever since I can remember, I wanted to be a sportscaster on ESPN. That's what I always wanted to do my whole life growing up. Probably started watching sports when I was about 7 or 8, and that's a big reason why I'm a Yankees fan. The Yankees, remember, were pretty darn good at the beginning of the 80s, and then things sort of went downhill. Cowboys, always on TV, and they were in the midst of going to 3 straight NFC championship games and losing them all. In fact, my first heartbreak as a child as it pertains to sports was the catch in that game. And my first ever NBA game that I ever watched was Lakers Sixers in the finals when Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was out and Magic played center and went bananas, and I fell in love with Magic Johnson, which is, I feel like a lot of kids, you love a player, you know, like in basketball, maybe it was Michael Jordan, and you live nowhere near Chicago, but you love Michael Jordan, so you root for the Bulls. Or, you know, you live nowhere near Cleveland, but LeBron James was your favorite player, so you ended up rooting for the Cavaliers. And that happened with me with Magic Johnson and the Lakers. So I've always wanted to be into sports. In fact, I remember when I was in, I think, 6th or 7th grade, something like that, we did this whole sort of, what do you want to be when you grow up kind of thing. And my theme was that I wanted to be a sportscaster and I want to work for ESPN. And so I was lucky enough I've never worked for ESPN, but I have been lucky enough and blessed enough to be involved in the sports world in a pretty prominent place. And it's been great.
By the way, are you still a Lakers fan?
Yes.
Okay, good.
I live in LA now. I have never changed. Like people will get on me and be like, dude, you root for the Lakers, Yankees, and Cowboys? Like, you're a front runner. Number one, when I was 7 or 8, I didn't know what a front runner was. All I did, and Tony Dorsett and Danny White were like my 2 favorite football players too. And they were both Cowboys. And to this day, they're still 2 of my favorites, right? So it was never about being a front runner. At that age, I didn't know what a front runner was. I guess I was just smart enough to pick good teams. Didn't know that the Cowboys and the Lakers and the Yankees are sort of like the teams that everyone either loves to hate in their respective sports, but it is what it is. I've never been a fan of any other team than those teams ever since I've been 7 or 8 years old. So.
Okay, that's great, because that's the thing with me, right? Like, I had tons of friends. I was a Knicks fan, so in like the prime Jordan years where he was just crushing us every year out of the playoffs, and so many of my buddies, and I'm going to name one of them. His name is Frank. He listens to this podcast, so he knows. I'm talking about you, Frank. That he loved Jordan, so he rooted for the Bulls, absolutely. And then when Jordan left, and the Bulls, like, he doesn't root for the Bulls anymore. I don't know what other team. Like, if you find a team when you're a kid and you love them because even of a single player, they just happen to be in there great, that's fine, so long as you stick with them, because it's not all peaches and cream. It's going to go downhill. If you stick with them, that's fine.
So I'll continue to sort of like dig my grave here amongst people who think I'm a bandwagon fan.
Yeah.
I also was a heavy North Carolina Tar Heels fan because of Michael Jordan and because of Sam Perkins and James Worthy. And the first year that I started watching college basketball is when UNC beat Georgetown in the national championship. And I'm still a North Carolina fan to this day. Always have been. And being from Connecticut, if you remember, UConn was never that good in terms of basketball. Sam Pernell was the head coach there. They were kind of like a lackluster team. And then Jim Calhoun took over and the whole state got Huskies fever. And I hate the Huskies, even though I'm from Connecticut.
Really?
Because all of my friends were Syracuse fans and they rooted for other schools in Georgetown and this and that. And then UConn got good and everyone suddenly was a Huskies fan. I'm like, you guys suck, man. Come on. I get it. It's like the state, but that shouldn't take over the team that you had been rooting for previously, because UConn was garbage before that. Nobody rooted for them. And now you're jumping on the bandwagon. And that's why I couldn't stand the UConn men's basketball team. To this day, I don't like it.
Yeah.
Because I've always been a Carolina fan through thick and thin. Even though most of the time it's been pretty good, I've always rooted for those same teams throughout my whole life.
Yeah. Well, I like to think that rooting for horrifically and like historically terrible teams, like I have built character. I live in New England now. I live in New Hampshire. So I can't let my son, my 7-year-old, not root for like the Pats. Like I just couldn't make him a Jets fan. I couldn't conscious. I like to tease him, but I couldn't ruin his life like mine has been ruined. But anyway, let's get back to you. Being a good dad. Let's get back to you here. Okay, so that's what you wanted to be. So did you go to college for that and start like wanting to become a sportscaster or what?
Yeah, so I went to my first 2 years were at Iona College in New Rochelle, New York. Went there freshman and sophomore year. Partied a little too much. My father was like, "Yeah, you're out of there. You're going to state school." So pulled me out, and I finished at Central Connecticut State, the Blue Devils. There's actually some pretty, maybe not high profile people, but like Dave Campo went there. Ricky Vitalico went there. I don't know if you remember him. He was a closer for the Phillies.
Sure.
And finished there and got my degree in TV, radio, communications, mass media. And I'll tell you, man, when I got out of college, I could not get into the industry anywhere. And I'm not talking about the fantasy industry. I'm talking about sports. I would go to local television stations wearing a suit and bringing my resume, and I got kicked my butt out the door. Nice. Here, we'll take your resume. Nice meeting you, kid. It was so hard. And there was a point and I have to, I have to give credit to my best friend, Dan, who I worked with. I was working at a place called EDR, Environmental Data Resources. It was just paying the bills. And it was literally like pulling maps for clients. That's what I was doing. And I was thinking, you know what? This sports thing's just not going to work out for me. I can't get in anywhere, nowhere. And I was applying at EDR to become like an account executive. And Dan pulled me aside. He's like, dude, you can't give up. Like, you can't give up. You have to keep trying. And shortly thereafter, the internet happened. And I ended up writing for several small websites making no money. It was all about just page views. And
is this
that's
sports,
sort of
by the way? Is this sports or fantasy sports at this point?
No, it's just sports. Just sport.
Okay.
Like, I was playing fantasy sports, but just sports. Like, I would write about Tiger Woods in the Tiger Slam. I would write about Bobby Knight choking. What was his name? Neil Reed. I can't remember the point guard's name. I would write about Marty McSorley and him being violent on the ice. I would write about WWE pay-per-view result. I would write about anything that was sports, anything, and it wasn't even fantasy. I actually had started the writing when I was in high school. I was the sports editor of the newspaper. And then at EDR, believe it or not, I was writing a sports column for the newsletter, which was literally like 10 pieces of paper stapled together once a month.
Huh.
That's how it started.
Okay.
That's how it started. And then the internet hit.
All right. So you're writing now for, a bunch, I guess, of these different sites, but you're still working at EDR. Where do you go from there?
So I am looking online for jobs in sports. And I found a listing for a fantasy sports writer and editor at commissioner.com, which I had never heard of before. And it was on this rinky-dink like website that didn't really have much of anything. It just had some listings. And so I applied to commissioner.com, sent in a bunch of my writing samples and my resume. And I remember at this point, my resume doesn't have a whole lot of sports stuff on it. And I got a call from David Hirsch, who worked for commissioner.com. Commissioner.com is basically what CBS Sportsline's product is now. CBS Sportsline bought Commissioner.com's fantasy football product and fantasy sports product. It was an award-winning product back in the day, when it was the FSTA. And they were looking for a writer, a content contributor. And so I went in downtown New York, Manhattan, New York City, and went in for an interview with Scott Angle, who you probably know,
Sure.
who's been in the industry for a long, long time. And a few other guys, and did the interview. Didn't really hear back from them for a few weeks, so I reached back out, and they said, we want to have you in for another interview. I said, okay, well, that's good. That's better than,
Sure.
being done.
Yeah.
Go in for the other interview, and I'll never forget. It was raining that day in New York City, and I had a suit on, and the suit probably didn't fit me very well. And, the old sort of like cab driving through New York City hits a puddle and you get nailed.
I'm familiar. Yes.
It's exactly what happened to me. And so I go in and I'm just wet and I'm like, God darn it. This just is not good. I ended up having a change of clothes though, because I was planning on staying in the city and going to a Yankee game later on that night. So the guys were cool about it, did the interview. I kind of changed, and all those guys are Red Sox fans. So it was kind of a funny sort of conversation. Went in, had the interview, again, didn't hear back from them for several weeks. And I'll never forget it. I was sitting at home at my dad's house, and they had contacted me about doing some fantasy basketball profiles. And I was like, okay, not being hired, but just doing it sort of freelance.
Okay.
And I'll never forget, I got the phone call. I'm watching a Yankees-Red Sox game on television, and it was Dave Hirsch again. And he said, hey, listen, we had initially only wanted to hire one person, but it ended up between being you and Tristan Cockcroft from ESPN, who is
Sure.
one of my best friends. And he's like, we couldn't decide, we hiring you both. So that's how I got my start in fantasy, was at commissioner.com, making like 37 grand a year and having to live in New York City. I lived on Staten Island and took the ferry over every morning. And luckily, we ended up moving down to Fort Lauderdale, which is where CBS Sportsline is headquartered. And we moved down there in March of 2001. And if that had not happened, I would have been on the Staten Island ferry when the planes were hitting the Trade Center.
Yeah.
And because literally Tristan and I would go to lunch in the Trade Center like all the time. We would walk around that area all the time. We were right there. So, thank goodness that we weren't there.
Sure.
Obviously the tragedy was bad enough as it was, without having to actually, live it out there and seeing it in person.
Yeah.
But that's how it all started. That's how it all started, man.
How long were you in New York before you went to Florida?
Like not even 6 months.
Okay.
I remember I got hired in October of 2000, started up then, and then I was out of there in March. Moved to Florida in March. And Tristan obviously was down there too. Him and his wife Marla had moved down there as well, and we lived in the same apartment complex for a while.
Oh, awesome!
What was it? Club Carib, I think it was in Coconut Creek, Florida. Yeah.
Okay. Well, very cool. All right. Yes, I would have guessed at $37,000 here. Even back then, Staten Island would have been the choice.
Yeah, I had to, and it was cool. I met a girl that I was dating down there for a little bit. Met her on the subway. And she kind of showed me around the area, so it all worked out pretty good.
Okay.
But yeah, dude, I mean, and I'm from Connecticut, and I live like in the country, man, like in the middle of nothing, just like trees and cows and everything else. And then I had been to New York, obviously, a million times, but living there is a totally different thing. So it was a little bit of a culture shock. So I'm like, Staten Island is a little less city. It smells a little bit from time to time when the wind blows the wrong way because it's a landfill. But I was like, let me do that. Let me go to Staten Island. And plus I had met this girl there. So I'm like, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right. But now you're in Florida and you and Tristan and you're still working. Is this still commissioner.com or is it?
Yeah, it's basically CBS Sportsline had sort of absorbed commissioner.com.
Okay.
So right at this point, it was basically CBS Sportsline.com. It was me, Tristan, Scott Angle, Marlon McRae was there as well, who's no longer in the industry. He's coaching basketball, I think high school basketball, or maybe even junior college at this point. Really great guy. And we were down there for, I was about 5.5 years. Tristan had left to go to ESPN. He was kind of tired of living in Florida, away from his family. He and Marlena wanted to have kids and that kind of thing, and he wanted to be back in the Northeast. So he ended up going to ESPN. Scott had left for ESPN shortly before that, I believe. And so I was there for about 5.5 years, and we worked with NFL.com pretty closely. So there was a couple of guys that I knew in the New York office, Mark Zimmerman and Craig Ellenport, and I'd become pretty friendly with them. And when I heard sort of some rumbles that NFL.com was going to go in-house, I was interested in maybe sort of taking over the lead there in terms of their fantasy football content. And, lo and behold, that's what happened. I interviewed with those guys. I had already been friends with them. Jim Nance was my referral. He made a phone call to those guys.
Wow.
That doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
And I got the job with the NFL. That would have been like the middle of 2006. So I had moved back to Connecticut, and I was going back and forth from Connecticut to New York City once a week to film some stuff in like this sort of like dungeness, old school sort of studio. It wasn't even a studio. It was just this black room where the NFL would film some stuff from time to time, because remember, this is way before everything kind of sort of blew up as it pertains to the fantasy sports industry and being on television and all that kind of thing. So that's where I was 2006, left Florida middle of that year and moved back to the Northeast.
So I have to imagine at this point, because this is probably like early NFL like fantasy type stuff, at least for them, right? Are you like the show over there?
I did everything. Yeah. They didn't have, Gil Brandt was writing fantasy for them.
Oh, really?
Gil Brandt was writing fantasy for them, and he wasn't writing a lot. They were in business with a website called footballinjuries.com, which was Jay Glazer, Stevie Cohen from SiriusXM,
sure,
and Adam Kaplan. And so when I got there, I took over. I wrote all the articles. I wrote the entire draft kit. I wrote all the player profiles. I did all the projections. When I was lucky enough to get an opportunity to be on NFL Total Access, I got that. I sucked in the beginning too. It's funny because when you're young and all of a sudden you're doing TV, like you're nervous, like you're just going to be nervous. And I remember looking back, it's so funny. I have a DVD copy of it. I was the first fantasy writer / analyst to be on one of the 4 major networks. I was on CBS with Randy Cross and Gus Johnson on a fantasy football special. And I look back at that now and I sucked. It was awful. I had this like Julius Caesar haircut thing going on. It was freaking brutal, man. It was bad. And even
Wait,
like some of my first stuff.
What's a Julius Caesar?
It's like the flat thing, you know. It's like somebody put a bowl on your head.
Got it. Yeah.
And it was awful. And like I can go back and laugh at myself now, but that was really cool. That was before I left CBS and then I went to the NFL. But so yeah, I did everything. Like I was the only basically content contributor for the NFL at the time as it pertained to fantasy football.
Man. All right. And obviously then it grew. And then when did you go out to LA?
So I moved to LA about a year after I left Florida. So left Florida in 2006, went back to Connecticut, New York and Connecticut, back and forth. That was probably about a year, maybe a little bit less, maybe like 10 months. And then they told me, hey, we want you to come out to California. And I was like, holy cow, I just got back to Connecticut in the Northeast with all my friends and my family. And now I got to go to California. Or I've never been to LA. You know, I'd only been out to California once, and that was like up in the Bay Area in San Francisco. So I remember I flew out here with my dad. I had literally less than 2 days to find an apartment and buy a car.
Okay.
And
no pressure.
That was it. And I didn't know anything. Like I at the time I was friends and still am with Andrew Siciliano. He's a dear friend. And, you know, Andrew was basically like letting me know, okay, so like, you know, go to Brentwood, check out Century City. There's some good places in West LA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I kind of went based on his lead and then ended up finding an apartment. It was like $1,500 a month. It was like a 1-bedroom, you know, it was like maybe 800 or 900 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
And I grabbed that place. At first I was going to live in Brentwood, but I found the place in Century City I liked better. I bought a car, left it in the parking lot at NFL Network for a couple of weeks, flew back to the Northeast. And then, you know, 2 weeks later I was in LA.
Any hesitation? I mean, this is a huge, huge thing right now that you're doing, that you're going across the country, away from your entire family and everything basically you've ever known, to do this whole thing. Are you just like, yeah, I'm good with it, I'm ready to roll, I feel great about this? Any hesitation, any concern, any worries?
I had a little bit of hesitation because financially I wasn't ready to make a move across country. And God bless him, Brent Jones, who is a dear friend of mine, and you remember him from the San Francisco 49ers.
Mm-hmm.
I had a conversation with Brent, and I said, man, I don't know what to do. Like, I don't have money to move. The NFL wouldn't pay to move anybody. And everyone was coming out, and they wouldn't pay. So I says, you know, Brent, I don't know what to do. Like, I mean, take a loan? I don't know what the hell. Brent said, let me know how much money you need, and I'll handle it. Wow. And I was like, really? And I was like, I don't want to take your money. He's like, dude, when I was younger, somebody did the same thing for me. I want to do the same thing for you. So Brent Jones actually just gave me the money to move out here. And, you know, at that point, it was a little bit easier to do it. And I was always like about following my dreams. And I wanted to do this since I was 8, you know, right. 7 or 8 years old. So, of course, I'm going to do it. It's a huge opportunity. I mean, the money was terrible. It was like $70,000 a year in LA back in, you know, the early, I mean, it wasn't that much. But I had to, man. Like, it was the next step.
Absolutely.
So came out in about 10 months after, you know, leaving CBS Sportsline.
That's awesome. That's crazy. All right. So last question before we get into, you know, kind of some fun stuff.
Yeah.
Life's different now for people who want to get into this industry. Life is different now. I mean, you're talking about like the beginning of the internet and you start sort of writing and it sort of goes from there. It's different now. There are a lot of people out there and that's the question I feel like I get most often. How do I get into it? What piece of advice would you offer people who are listening to this and be like, man, I want to be the next Fabs, not the singer, obviously you, of course. What advice would you offer to them?
You've got it much easier than I did. I literally started an email mailing list. So every time I wrote an article on one of the websites, and again, it was all about page views, I didn't get paid, I would send out an email. I'd have probably, ultimately, I think I had about 200 people on there, somewhere ballpark, and said, hey, I just wrote an article about, you know, the Yankees. Here, go check it out. Let me know what you think. There was no social media. There was no podcasts. There was very rarely any fantasy sports on television at all. I did one show in Minneapolis. It was I don't know if it was DirecTV. I can't remember what it was, but I did one show in Minneapolis, and again, I was very green at that time, and I was supposed to be doing the show every single week of the football season. It was 2001, and then when 9/11 happened, that was the end of that. There was no travel anymore, so no one was going anywhere. So, but I would say that stand out, network. I have met so many great people in this industry just by networking, man.
Yeah.
Who doesn't love fantasy football? You've got a great opportunity to network, and try to think out of the box and be a little bit different. Come out and have content that people want to absorb. There are so many great fantasy football analysts out there right now. Mike Clay, and there's Jeff Ratcliffe is great. Graham Barfield, who I worked with a little bit at NFL. I mean, I can go on and on and on and on and on. I mean, 4 for 4 over there. Warren Sharp is tremendous. Like, there's so many just great guys out there. So the industry's bigger, so there's more opportunities out there too. And so that's big. But start on social media. Do a YouTube channel. You could do your own podcast. I'm on podcasts for, I've done podcasts with teenagers who are just starting off, and they're like, "Hey, Fabs, can you jump on our podcast?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. I got 10, 15 minutes. That's fine.
Right.
Happy to do it." Make yourself known. Put yourself out there. For me, what I was really trying to do was entertain and inform. And I will tell you right now, there's a lot of people out there with the analytics, Cynthia Freeland, who's just unbelievable. Those people are on another level when it comes to the stats. And I know my stats, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
But I want to entertain people too. I want to have fun. I want people to have fun. Fantasy football is all about fun.
Yeah.
It's not something that's a life or death. It's a lot of fun. And I want to do that too. So be yourself, but also make your information make sure that you're informative, and listen, be yourself, have some personality. There's certainly a lot of people out there that are just, numbers. And a lot of times that gets monotonous and boring. Don't be that. It's fantasy football. Have fun with it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great advice. The one thing that I will add, because it goes to something that you mentioned earlier, your first television appearance, you look back on it and you're like, "Oh my God, that was terrible," right?
Terrible.
That's almost universal. I feel like if you start a podcast, if you start writing, like your beginning stuff, it's always rough. It takes practice to sort of do all that sort of stuff. So even to hear somebody like you, who's so incredibly comfortable on any medium at this point, to think back to your original appearance and be like, "Oh God, that was
Dude,
not."
I used to do radio interviews because that's what you got basically back in the day. It wasn't being on television. I used to do radio interviews and I'd be nervous as hell.
Yep.
On a radio. You can't see me. I'm on a telephone, and I was nervous as all heck.
Yeah.
And now I'm doing live TV in front of, millions and millions of people. I mean, last year I did a segment on a halftime of a preseason game on NFL Network. I mean, that's like, those are huge audiences. There's like millions and millions of people. And I'm like,
right.
Because it's reps, man. It's just reps, and you just get used to it.
Absolutely. And reps is really what it's all about. So start producing content out there. If you want to do it, there are a million places you can do it. Just practice. Your first stuff is not going to be great. It's just not. Nobody's is. Yep. You've got to work at it, and it gets better. And even to hear you, Fabs, talk about it and how you look back at your first one and it wasn't great. That's good to hear. Dude, and that's good for people to know.
I should put a little bit of it out there. It was brutal, man. Like, I was with Randy Cross and Gus Johnson. These guys are pros, and it's my first time doing it, and it's laughable. I was like, holy cow,
I just really want the hair. I just want to see the haircut. I mean, that's really where I'm going.
It was horrible. And like, now I got more gray hair. See,
I got plenty myself.
But like, the hair was bad. The hair looks better now. It's got thank God I still got at least some of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. No big deal.
Thank God I still got a little bit left. I'm, Italian, and my whole family's all bald. So, I mean, I'm lucky at this point. But yeah, it's, I'll have to put it out there sometime. It's pretty fun. And that's another thing that I feel like people need to do. Don't take yourself too seriously. Be able to laugh at yourself. You can totally be self-deprecating, and people will respect that. Don't take yourself too seriously. It's fantasy football.
I'm a huge fan of self-deprecating humor. I think that's great. Yeah. And that is the thing. A lot of people do take themselves. Be authentic. Just be yourself, but have fun with it. It's basically exactly what you said. So I echo all of that. All right. We are now done with the quote unquote interview portion. This is what I like to call the blitz. I ask you 10 questions about yourself.
Oh, I love this. I do this on my Sirius XM show, man.
Oh, do you? All right.
I love it.
All right,
I love
good.
it.
Well, these are silly, so I hope we'll see where it goes.
So,
Also,
sillier the better.
I score you, so you might be about yourself. I might view it as the wrong answer, just so you know, and I can't be challenged. Okay, number one. People seem to love this one. Who was the first player that you ever drafted in your first ever fantasy league?
Terrell Davis.
Oh.
And I obviously met Terrell at NFL Network. He's a good friend. Great guy, and we joke about it all the time. In fact, the last year, Fred Taylor was in the studio, and my first draft, TD was my number one pick, and I traded Jerome Bettis and Michael Irvin to get Fred Taylor, and I won the championship. That was Fred's rookie year where he went bananas, and it was so TD was my
so
first.
Cheating. You get to meet your first ever fantasy pick. All right,
well, I've met so many LaDainian Tomlinson, Marshall Faulk,
cheating.
like these guys that I used to draft. I got LT into fantasy football. He's played now.
Yeah.
Kurt Warner got into it. It's again, I can't say it enough. I'm blessed, man. I mean,
well, if I ever meet Peyton Manning, then I can tell him the story of how he was after his big one. All right, number two, Fabs. I don't know why, but I have this very irrational fear of moths. If there's a moth in my house, I get totally freaked out. I have no idea why. What is something, if there is anything, that you are irrationally afraid of?
Sharks.
Well,
I won't go in the ocean, bro. Outside of just up to my ankles. I'm good.
Okay, yeah, that's
I want nothing to. No, I'm good. I saw Jaws as a kid, and I'm not even kidding you. It was so irrational that when I would go into the bathroom and take care of business, I'd be afraid to sit because I thought he was coming up through that pipe and biting me in the rear end. I'm telling you, you have weird, stupid, irrational fears as a kid. And that movie scared the crap out of me. I was not going in the ocean. I'm all good. I see people on the beach surfing all the time. I'm like, have fun. Right. I'm not interested.
That's correct as well. As your first answer was correct. That is correct. Obviously, I was like, well, sharks. Well, I mean, most people are scared of sharks, but not going into the ocean. Yeah, that takes it. I had a 2-year period after I first saw Jaws where I also did not get into the water, but I got over it. You haven't. That's irrational. No, that's good. That's a correct answer.
Good.
Fill in the blank. The best waiver system for fantasy leagues is blank.
I think traditional. I get it. A lot of people love the Fab system, and it's fun too. But when you're in as many leagues as I am, it just takes more time out of my day to figure out how much I'm going to put on what players. I just like the traditional waiver wire system, and a lot of people out there probably don't.
Yeah.
But I'm a traditional kind of guy.
Well, considering that it basically kind of a play on your name, I have to mark it incorrect because I was looking for Fabs. You know what I mean? Because Fab.
I know.
Fab.
No, I totally get it. And Fab is fine. It's cool. It's just it takes too much time out of my day.
It does.
When you're in so many leagues, I'm if they were all Fab, I'd be I got to spend half a day just putting in claims. No, I'm not doing it.
I get it. Well, look, I try desperately to mark one incorrect at some point because I can't have people getting perfect scores on this. It ruins the entire thing. So I'll mark that one incorrect. I read somewhere that you were a Seinfeld fan. Is that true?
Seinfeld, I love it. Curb, love it.
Love Curb. Okay.
I always like to use little lines from those shows. Although with Curb, you swear a little bit more.
Yeah,
so
you got to be careful.
Really
got to be careful.
I'm a big fan of Seinfeld.
Okay, favorite episode or best episode of Seinfeld?
Oh man,
tough.
Has to be the contest. But there's so many good ones. But the contest is just that one is hilarious, man.
Contest is solid, man. They had such a run. They had a 3-season run where
there were so many great episodes.
Just gold.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
I always love Marine Biologists. The end of that one.
Where that one's good. Or George Shrinkage.
Shrinkage, of course, out in the Hamptons.
It's so fantastic.
Good. Well, there was a handful of correct answers, and you're definitely correct on that one. Yeah. Okay, you have lived now in both places, although obviously you're only in New York for a little bit of time. Better food, Los Angeles or New York?
New York. Yes. You're never gonna You're never gonna get me to say LA's got better food. The pizza in New York. I'm Italian. Okay, the Italian food out there is far superior to anything here in Southern California.
The best. And legitimately, I said we live in New Hampshire. There are a few differences between New Hampshire and New York City. My wife and I always say that the biggest thing we miss about New York, it's not like the atmosphere, wasn't like the shows, it was the food. The food is the best anywhere. So absolutely correct. New York is right.
Can't beat it.
The best sports moment that you've ever witnessed live.
Woo. Yankees winning the World Series in '99. I was at home. It was a home game, obviously, and I was in the bleachers, and it was amazing. It was, I remember Roger Clemens being on the top of the dugout. I remember the parties afterwards. Everyone was just elated, going crazy. That has to be my favorite moment.
99 is the Braves, right?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes.
That's the one time that I rooted for the Yankees because I hated the Braves so much because they eliminated us on the Kenny Rogers walk game in extra innings.
I remember that. Yes, I remember that. But that was actually very special to me too. '99 because I had a dear uncle who was very close to me. Had passed away at the age of 49. He had heart problems. And he was a diehard Yankees fan. Like, he loved the Yankees. And so me and my cousin, his son, were there together to watch that. And so that was really special.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. Well, that's it. That is correct. That's a great moment, obviously, to be at live. If you could live anywhere in the entire world other than in your current location, where would it be?
So I have only been out of the United States once. And it was for a 2 or 3 hour period in Matamoros, Mexico. I was hammered the whole time. I don't remember. It was spring break. 1996, we went to South Padre Island, and then we went over the border. All I remember is that there was a lot of little kids trying to sell me gum, and the streets were really narrow, and the cab drivers drove like crazy. So I'm not a world traveler. I was actually supposed to go to the Dominican Republic in April, and then all of a sudden the coronavirus hit, and that all went out the window.
Yes.
So I don't know, like...
You could be in the U.S. You could keep
I'd
the U.S.
have to keep it within the United States. And to be honest, there's so many great cities in the United States. I'd probably go back to Florida, though. I'd probably go back to Florida because it's way cheaper to live there. They don't have state income tax. So you could do a lot more with your money. It's a beautiful area. The weather is always really nice, although it's hot as hell a lot of the times. But I would say Florida. But New York City is, New York City is another great place to live in. But I've never been like a city guy, right? I've just never been like that. So I like kind of like, suburbia, that kind of stuff. So,
all right.
It'd probably be Florida in the United States.
All right. I'm going to mark Florida correct because I live in a very cold climate most times.
Yeah.
I desperately want to go someplace where it's warm, as does my wife. But Fabs, never out of the United States. I mean...
I'm just like...
We got to get
I would love to go to Italy. I would love to go to Paris. I would love to go to...
Fabs.
No, at some point I will. At some point I absolutely will. But I've just never done it. I don't like flying, okay? Every time I fly, I got to pop something.
Okay.
Because I just get anxiety. And so, the thought of flying overseas to another country kind of freaks me out a little bit. And not being able to speak the language kind of freaks me out a little bit. But I'm at the point where I'm over that and I'll just do it. I'll take whatever and I'll be fine on the plane.
Yep.
But I was trying to do it in April and it unfortunately didn't happen.
I get it.
I will certainly do that at some point in the... Hell, my father was the same kind of way. My mother, they've never traveled out of the country, but I think my father has traveled like out of the country like one time in his whole life, or maybe two. I'll get there though.
Well, do Italy for sure. My wife, I wanted Hawaii for our honeymoon. My wife insisted on Italy, and it was awesome. Also, you can get by speaking English there, like completely. Everybody speaks English there, so I'll
probably gain like 10 pounds. Too.
Yes, well, that's true, but it's worth it. Trust me. All right, Fabs, my 40th birthday is on Monday.
Happy birthday!
Thank you. I had a golf trip to Scotland planned with a bunch of guys. Obviously, that is not happening because of the coronavirus. So, given the current climate, what do you think I should like? How do I celebrate my 40th birthday? It's a big one on Monday, given that what the current climate is. What do I do? This is a big one.
Here's what I did,
Go.
And obviously it was a lot different. I'm going to be 47 actually in a few weeks. We went to Vegas. Me and my buddies who were all turning 40 that year, we all went to Vegas. And we don't drink, like we're not drinkers, we're not partiers. We don't do any of that kind of stuff. We just went to shows and had a whole heck of a lot of fun. Now, I don't know if you're willing to travel anywhere within the United States.
Yeah.
If you are, then I don't know how far you'd like to travel, whether or not you would like to do actually airline travel or if you'd rather do it in a car. Heck, for me, I think it would be fun to drive down the coast of the East Coast, hit Boston. I don't know if you've ever been to Salem. Salem's a lot of fun. I love horror movies and stuff like that. So Salem, hit New York City, keep going south. Washington, D.C. is tremendous. You go check that out, although I don't know what the climate is there. It's been a little crazy in Washington, D.C. But sort of do like a little bit of a drive down, down the East Coast, have a little bit of fun with it if you'd rather not travel via plane, which a lot of people now don't want to do for obvious reasons.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to mark it correct. My actual 40th birthday, almost assuredly, is my daughter is going to write and perform a song for me that is completely inappropriate for like a 9-year-old, but she doesn't understand that. It's horrible to watch. My son's going to make me play Super Mario Brothers with him and like give me like, here, Dad, you can play more. And I'm like, I don't want to do this. And my wife's going to buy me an ice cream pie that she is going to eat herself. So that's
hey man,
it's
you're with family. That's great.
It's an alternative 40th birthday. But I'm marking it correct because yours is better. Okay. This one, the easy one. Number 9, Eli Manning, Hall of Famer, yay or nay?
I'm a Cowboys fan. Remember, I will say yes, because he won 2 Super Bowls against the elite team of this era. I mean, you beat the Patriots twice, right? I mean, if it weren't for the Giants, I mean, we're still talking about the Patriots as being one of the best franchises. Imagine if they had won those games, right? So I will go that he belongs in the Hall of Fame because he did have. Listen, Troy Aikman went to the Hall of Fame, 3 Super Bowls. He was never like a really great statistical quarterback at all. He was on a great team. He was obviously a very accurate passer. And Eli Manning, I feel like, deserves to be in.
Okay, so I'm marking it correct, but I want to do it on a technicality in that I think Eli Manning is going to get into the Hall of Fame. I think if I had a vote, I would probably say no. But if I think he's going to get in, which means Eli Manning, Hall of Famer, he will be yes, so you will ultimately be proved correct. So I'm going to mark it correct. Last one. If you had to choose one wrestler, you can go back as far as you want. Early wrestling, current wrestling, whatever you want, to be your teammate in a tag team like wrestling event, who would it be?
See, I have so many friends who are wrestlers, and so they'll get mad at me, like, Miz is my buddy, Seth Rollins, the Bella Twins, like, the list goes on and
you
on.
You only get one, though. You're gonna piss some people off, so choose wisely.
My favorite's always been Shawn Michaels. I love him. I love Shawn Michaels. I love watching his old matches to this day, dude. Like, I have WWE Network just so I can watch old matches. Like, not even just Shawn. The documentary that they did between Shawn and Bret Hart was just tremendous. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
Yes.
I love Shawn Michaels. Loved him growing up. Loved him when he was in the Rockers with Marty Jannetty, and then watching sort of his ascent. And the things that you hear about him, he wasn't the best dude in the world. He was kind of an a-hole. So I guess it's good that I never met him at that point because maybe things would have changed. He's become a great man now. He's found God and religion and that kind of thing. So that's great for him. But Shawn Michaels is always going to be my favorite WWE wrestler. There's a lot of guys I've loved. Stone Cold is a friend of mine. I love Stone Cold. I've loved Bret Hart too. A lot of guys, but I'd have to go Shawn Michaels.
You've got a good life, Fabs. I'll mark it correct for sure. I feel like I would go Mr. Perfect because he was like very mean.
See, now I'm friends with his son. I never met him. Joe Hennig is a friend of mine and a great guy. And I was a fan of Mr. Perfect as well. There's so many of those guys. Man. Like Hulk Hogan and Ultimate Warrior and Macho Man. Like there's so many guys from back in the day. I always kind of like the smaller guys because I'm like a smaller guy. So Shawn was not a big dude. Bret Hart wasn't a big dude. So I was kind of like those guys. But like Dolph, Nick sure. Nemeth, like Dolph Ziggler, he's awesome. Like he's like the closest thing I feel like WWE has had to Shawn Michaels in a long time in terms of what he can do in the ring. So I've always been a fan of those kind of guys.
Well, you did well. 9 correct, only 1 incorrect, which I have to do.
I'll take it.
So close, so close. Fabs, thank you so much for taking the time just to pop on, tell us about your story. This is the first time we've ever had a chance to speak other than in an FSGA draft a couple of weeks ago. But honestly, it was fantastic talking to you. I'm a big admirer. I really appreciate you taking the time to stop on.
I appreciate you having me on. It was a lot of fun. It's always fun going down memory lane, man. It's always a lot of fun. So I do appreciate that.
Yeah, my pleasure. All right. You can find Fabs over at Michael. Remember, Michael_Fabiano. Over on Twitter. Don't tweet the other guy, okay, unless you want to listen to some music. You can find all this great stuff over at NFL Media. Remember, we are giving away a signed Mike Evans jersey. Just leave a review for the show on Apple Podcasts or Stitcher. Send the screenshot of that review to GameChangers@FantasyPros.com. We'll be back next week with another guest talking about their story. I'll talk to you then.